All right. Welcome back to another episode of Virtual GM. You guys have heard us talk a lot about EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. In fact, as you know, we start every episode with the segue, and we realized it's probably time to bring in Craig, our EOS coach, and let him just, take the water right from the well and let him feed you guys some information. So
we've shouted out Craig like 5 times.
Oh, lots of times. We did a whole EOS episode.
Yeah.
So Craig, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, guys. It's
so excited. Pull that mic over a little bit more.
Yeah, you want that thing right on your mouth. You want it tickling your beard.
Right there.
That's a lot better. So actually, it's funny. I was looking through our podcast download stats today.
Yeah.
And our EOS episode is our second most downloaded episode.
Ayo.
So, right on.
You got to give the people what they want. That's what we're here for.
In fact, I was talking to Charmine from the Hotel Zaz today.
Yeah.
And she was even asking about EOS. So
that's awesome.
A lot of our podcast listeners, these are some of the people that we've started to work with now, and they're familiar with you, the processes that you've walked us through. And so this is actually probably a really sought after episode that we're providing now.
Oh, no, I'm excited to have Craig here and, like I said, get the water right from the well. And we're about to graduate from EOS. So we've got our final EOS quarterly meeting in September. So it'll be 2 years that we've been on this journey with you. And really it's been longer than that because we've been doing stuff with you for like 5 or 6 years. It's been a long time. But so that being said, let's start with the segue. Let's turn it over to you, Craig. You can rip a segue off for us. One personal best, one business best from last week.
Well, my business best is being with you two fine gentlemen today on this podcast. In the last week. I really appreciate you having me on there. So that's my business best. And personal best, we're right in the middle of a remodel at home, and that thing is winding down. We got about 75% of that done, but I've lived in chaos for about the last 8 weeks, so that is winding down. So
you were talking to us about that at the last quarterly. That's nice to hear that's winding down. That's great.
Well, and you're such a regimented person. I can't imagine that you take well to lack of structure in your life.
It's taken a lot of effort to just keep things calm, be mindful about things, because when your life's in disarray, it's and you don't have a grip on the home life. You put a little EOS spin on that. It's life isn't as good.
And what have you guys been doing for food? Have you had access to your kitchen or?
So we've been ordering Fed Up, right? I'm going to get a shameless plug for Fed Up, and then just pop it in. We have a microwave and a sink in the.
I wondered if you gotten any more appliances, because I remember you said Fed Up in the microwave last time.
That's it. And we have a washer and dryer back.
Hey,
it's so nice to have these great basic appliances that you take for granted. So my personal best is that, and just glad to be getting that down.
When's it supposed to be done?
First week of August.
You're close.
Cool.
Close. Yeah. Oh, it's exciting. I'm excited to see it. All right, Spencer, you want to go?
Yeah. So business best, I'm just going to combine them. Business and personal best was having Sean Cannell on.
That was pretty awesome.
Last week. That for me was we chased that goal for a year and a half.
Aggressively.
It became the point where it was a personal goal because I had hunted down this man's cell phone number through the Nevada business entity search, which we did not tell him, by the way.
You didn't tell me you were stalking him.
We kind of did.
We sort of hinted at it. I just didn't want to tell him the full story because I was worried he'd just push end on the podcast.
We should have told him we're those guys who said it's Tuesday in Utah.
I thought about that and I was like, ugh, I don't think so. So those would be my personal and business. Was I accomplished a personal goal. We got to talk to him. Business, what a springboard and catalyst and a huge catapult for Vibrant Management.
Yeah.
But also just a wealth of knowledge for our audience too. And if you guys didn't catch that was our last episode with Sean Cannell. It's a long episode. It's about an hour and a half. So, find a time where you can listen to the whole thing because he drops some amazing knowledge.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you're listening to this and didn't listen to that, go back and listen to that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So many takeaways and tactical information that you can use for yourself. Okay, so my business best was obviously also having Sean on. It was just such a cool thing to go to the conference, and we didn't even know who he was when we went to the conference, and to be so blown away and so impressed by what he and his team put on. And then we talked about it in the last episode, but Spencer and I put on LinkedIn notifications. If Sean did anything, we were on it. And we tried so hard, and to actually have that come to fruition was just really cool. And then personal best, my kid and wife have started golfing, and it's been really fun. But also then I golf with my wife and kid a lot. And so this last weekend I got to golf with some buddies of mine, and it was really fun. My old business partner from Houston just moved back, and we played the Ledges, which is one of my favorite courses, and he shot a 77. We're very competitive. And I shot a great score. Yeah. And I shot an 82. And I told him, I said, the only time I'm okay with you beating me, and I'm happy for you, is if you shoot in the 70s. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's fair. Real quick on Sean, I talk to his social media team today.
Yeah.
And I was like, can you just pull up his LinkedIn and like scroll through the notifications? So they went way back in time. And Tyler, who was on it, was like, oh, wow. You guys were the only ones engaging for months.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Mine says in 12.
Yeah. And then I dropped that we want to play NFL Blitz with him.
That's
and
awesome.
He was like, well, it probably can happen when he's in Vegas. He's probably down for that.
That's great.
So,
That's so cool.
Yeah,
Okay, Craig. So I think what would be helpful before we really get into the meat and bones of EOS, maybe just a quick backstory on who you are and how you got to where you are right now.
So thanks. And again, thanks for having me on. So for over 40 years, I've been in entrepreneurial and family businesses, been involved in them, having them, running them. And so my background has been in that for the last 40 years. And then I had some partners that we decided to separate. And I wanted to get into a different line. I just was tired of what we were doing. We were doing turnaround management. We were purchasing businesses that weren't performing as well as they could have been. I was moving around a lot, but I decided I wanted to try something new. But I wanted to stay close to entrepreneurial business owners. So what I did was I started a peer group franchise. Cody, you're familiar with that tab. Yeah, the Alternative Board. And I started that here in St. George back in 2011.
Was that hard to start to get people to join that? Because you weren't from St. George, so you were new to the area. How did you even get that started and going and make connections?
That's right. That's exactly right. That's probably one of the hardest ways to do it, is to come to an area where people don't even really know you. So nobody knew me.
How long had you lived in St. George when you started it?
I moved here and started it. I hadn't even lived here.
Cool.
So, and I just got connected in the business community. I started to just do some research about who were some of the bigger players in the business community.
Sure.
Chamber, other people that were connected, got introduced to them, and just started to network.
Cool.
And then built the business from there. But I really searched out entrepreneurial family business owners for that business.
That's how we got started with you, because Breck started on Tab for the Cliff Rose back then. And then we did that secondary Tab board, and I was on that for a little bit. And that was really how we got started and our introduction to you as a coach.
That's right. And I had an opportunity to work with over 100 business owners in that business.
In Tab?
In that peer group business. So that was really instrumental in a springboard. But when I started Tab here, that was a franchise. And I had one of my fellow Tab franchisees come to me and say, hey, you've got to do this too. And he had me traction. And he said, you got to do this right now. I said, listen, I'm just starting a franchise. I can't take this on too. I don't even know what traction is. He said,
had you heard of it before he gave you the book?
Never heard of it.
Wow.
Oh.
And he said, but this will change your life. It'll change the life of the business owners that you work with.
So he just gave you the book traction?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I put it on the shelf.
Can you say who that business owner was? I'm curious.
Yeah. So he was from British Columbia, Kevin Armstrong.
Okay.
Cool.
And so was a Tab business owner for longer than I was, over 20 years.
Okay.
But he said these concepts in this book is going to help small business owners, going to help your small business owners get more of what they want from the business. They're simple tools that work. And so for 3 years, it sat on my shelf as I got my Tab business up and running. Then after I got it up and running, I said, I'm going to read that book. And I read it. I said, wow, these are some transformational tools here that can really help entrepreneurial teams, the ones I'm working with. And even though Tab had some great tools, but these were just simple tools, proven tools that worked.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I started to incorporate those with my Tab business owners, and they still use them today. Even the ones that aren't fully doing EOS and living EOS.
Yeah, because there's probably a lot of parallels between the two, right?
There is some, but I think what the simplicity of EOS was just so much easier for an entrepreneur to use those tools, because you're so busy doing a lot of other things. You don't need complications. So anything that's complicated usually doesn't stick with an entrepreneurial business owner. And that's what I found. So I launched into EOS. I started doing EOS on my own first. That's like a self. That's
what I wanted to do.
Yeah. And I started to do it. And I had a great friend, Paul Detlef, so I'll give him a shout out. That was another Tab facilitator, and he had bought into EOS already.
Where's he from, Paul?
Paul lives in Chicago.
Okay, I know a Paul Detlef who lives in, that's a random name.
Yeah.
And I know a Paul Detlef who lived in Scottsdale, but he's from Chicago. So I wonder if,
interesting.
And what a small world.
Yeah,
I'm going to have to reach out and see.
Yeah, but he's a great guy. He was mentoring me, and he was helping me use, because I was reading traction and just implementing with a couple of people who are locally learning it. And he finally just said, Craig, you just need to take the plunge, and you just need to become a full-fledged implementer, go through the training, become a professional implementer for EOS. And after some prodding, about 6 months, I decided to do that. And I still have my boards at that time, my peer groups that I was facilitating. But then I launched also as well as a professional implementer with EOS, and really drank the Kool-Aid. And
what's most of your mix now? Is it all EOS, or do you still have some tab boards?
No, it's probably I still have a couple of groups that I facilitate. But in terms of how much of my time, like 70% of my time is EOS, and 30% of those peer groups. These are business owners that have been with me for 10 years. These peer groups, so they didn't want to go anywhere. And I said, "Listen, I'm loyal to you. You've started with me. I'm going to stay with you for as long as you want to do that." And some of those folks do EOS, like Vibrant did. And they were sat on a board, and Breck sat on a board, and then they also used EOS as their system to run their business.
So you know what's funny is that we just did a podcast with Richard Aday. He's the CEO of Thinkreseverations.
Oh.
And I know we've talked about Thinkreseverations a little bit, like in our quarterlies with you. And he also does EOS.
Yeah.
And was telling us on the podcast, because we were talking about rocks and scorecard and things like that. So he brought up EOS.
Nice.
And he actually has a similar story to you, where he read Traction and just kind of tried to do it himself, similar to what Cody just said that we attempted to do, right? And so then they made the dive in with an implementer. And since the dive with the implementer, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he was just saying it's been exponential growth since the implementer, right? And they're probably on the same journey as us. They were about 2 years in.
Yeah, that's right. They were almost identical tracks as us.
Yep.
And then Sean Cannell, he was talking about Patrick Lencioni.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what book he said he was reading, but it was one of the ones that we had read.
Was it The Advantage? Is that a Patrick Lencioni book?
Yeah, I think that was it.
I think it was The Advantage.
And so we asked him if he was familiar. He wasn't, but it's like Patrick Lencioni and EOS are basically two guys telling a very similar message.
We also shouted you out during that episode.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, we can't teach organizational health better than Lencioni.
Yeah, right.
So
that's what he was talking about, actually. It was organizational
That's
health.
actually absolutely what it was. In fact, I was listening to Sean's podcast, and he was talking about, just on the lines of organizational health, their dress code.
Oh, interesting.
Which is funny because that's been a topic at Vibrant, as Craig knows, right? So Sean Cannell's dress code is a Bible verse.
Yeah, I think I heard something about that.
So it's in, it's like a podcast from like 3 weeks ago, and their dress code is not conducive to what they actually wear, like the tangible clothes, but it's just more like the dress code of their personality.
Interesting.
And it's really not like anything like spiritual. It's just like the shield of faith, or whatever. I don't know what Bible.
He's a pretty spiritual guy.
Very Christian, right? Yeah. But I thought it was really interesting, like how their dress code was more morality based than it was like the appearance that they give off.
Interesting.
Because
I want to go back and listen to that.
Yeah, one will be a byproduct of the other, right? So I thought that was actually really interesting that Sean had shared that when that was in the mix of us and our organizational health discussion.
So how long have you been doing EOS now?
Going on 8 years.
Wow. What do you have one success story that for you is like, wow, this is the one? Like this company really,
besides Vibrant, of course,
shifted their direction.
I do. I have several, but the one that comes to mind is a nonprofit that I've worked with. Now, Gino, when I first got involved in EOS, said if you come across a nonprofit that wants to implement EOS, run the other way. Because oftentimes nonprofits are not ran like a business. And nonprofit is kind of a misnomer. Because
it doesn't mean they're not making money.
They're making money.
They have to make money in order to fund their operations and to fund their charitable.
Yeah, they're just not taking anything over the top.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they contacted me. They were actually a referral. We sat down. I said, listen, the only way EOS is going to work is if you run this like a business. And fortunately, the chapter president of this nonprofit said, no, I come from the business world. We're running this like a business. The board's not involved. We're the executive team. The board has hired me to run this organization, and we're going to run it and turn a profit and continue to fund our endowment and all the things that we need to do as a charitable organization. And they had growing pains with that, right? Because they had volunteers. And when you have volunteers, that kind of creates a whole other dynamic in an organization. Mm-hmm. And so, but implementing EOS got them the clarity that they were lacking, helped them implement processes, even around their volunteer program, and allowed them to do what they do best, which is deliver wishes to sick kids.
Sure.
And so that's a success story there and more EOS implementers are working with nonprofits, but the key to working with a nonprofit is that we run this like a business, and there's some structural things and some definite factors that have to be talked about up front before I jumped into that implementation. And they're still a client today, 7 years later.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Are you doing all the quarterlies with them, or is it like an annual? Or
No. Right now, because I'm where I'm at 7 years, I'm doing their annuals right now.
that's what I
At
thought.
year 5, they graduated. They want to take it. I said, "Hey, great, you're ready. I've taught you everything I can. You've got these tools. They had a great integrator." Because that's what it's designed to do. I'm not there to work my way into a business where they never get rid of me.
Yeah.
My job is
I
to
like that.
teach
Your goal isn't to have you around forever. Your goal is to help them be the best self-sufficient business they can be.
My job is to get them graduation. Now, there's some teams that want me around to run their quarterlies and annuals. For like, I have a team now that's with me 6, 7 years. I still run all their quarterlies. They say, "Hey, listen, we're never going to do this. It's not what we do." And they just say, "That's not what we do best. Our highest and best use is doing our business. I want to come into a quarterly and not have to worry about trying to be a facilitator and an implementer. I want to have this facilitated." But that's not the way Gino developed the system. He wanted to develop, it's like, "Hey, we're going to teach you everything we know. We're going to graduate you, and you're going to go on and do this."
I can say, sitting on the opposite side of the table, right, and thinking, "Oh, we can just do EOS ourselves. Like, the stuff's online, the books exist." And I really believe that we could do it. But then after going, because I remember we've told this story before, but we'll tell it again. Spencer's first EOS meeting, he had worked with us for like
2 weeks or something
not very
like
long.
that. Yeah, it was pretty
we're
short.
like, "Yeah, we're going to EOS." I was like, "But like, dude, everything's dialed. Like, we'll be out of there by lunchtime."
Oh, yeah.
I remember
Yeah, that was amazing. He's like, "We'll be done by noon."
noon.
for sure."
That's what he said.
Yeah, we were there at like 5:30 or something,
Yeah,
and it was
we were
like,
there
"Oh
for a
my
while.
gosh, there was so much I didn't realize." And it is so helpful to have that person, not just to guide, but also to press. Because there's times that you can be a wimp, or maybe you don't want to talk about a tough subject, or it's easier to avoid it than to get into it. And so having you there, who isn't intertwined in the daily business, to be like, "Well, is that really how you guys feel?
Yeah,
or is
right.
that really what's going on?" And solving issues and working through it. I really wasn't a believer. And also because we're just such a small company. So EOS is a big financial commitment. And it was really, I was scared to make that commitment. And I had a hard time thinking, okay, what's my direct ROI on that? Like, because you can't, it's kind of like some marketing efforts where it's working, but you can't say exactly how.
Yeah, it's difficult to tie like a dollar figure to it.
Right.
Yeah.
But after going through it,
But there is one.
yet now I definitively know, like, wow, we'd have never done this had we not had the intention that our business had, right? Like, this was the first year ever that we went into the year really knowing, like, because we did our best the first year in EOS, but we didn't have enough data and we didn't have enough knowledge. We're kind of guessing. Remember, me and Breck and Drez were arguing over like what was possible, and we didn't really have the data. But this year in Scottsdale at our annual, it's like it was dialed. It was like, this is what it is. If we want to do better, here's what we can do. And so having that intention and going into every quarter with your rocks, I know definitively we would have never achieved what we have without EOS. And also to the point of like Spencer wouldn't be on the team if we didn't have EOS.
Totally.
Because I just would have said, we can't afford you. Right. But we happened to have that seat that was open because of the accountability chart. And so I was like, well, we do have a seat, but I just don't know how we could make it work. But because of EOS, and in fact, I think when we went and met with you, we went over the accountability chart. I think we went over like the VTO.
Yeah, Breck read the vision or the speech for the very first time. Yeah, it was the first time you guys had heard it.
Right. Showed the core values. And so really, without EOS, Spencer wouldn't be here, And Correct. So it really has been quite the journey. I want to do something fun. So I ripped us all a piece of paper. I want us all to write down our favorite part of EOS, unbeknownst to each other, and then we'll share it and why.
Okay.
That way there's no cheating.
I'll
pass the pen around.
Yeah, I did not bring a pen.
I got you.
While you're writing that down, you mentioned something I think that's really important is the EOS. You can do so. There's over 100,000 companies using EOS. Now they're all not using a professional implementer.
Sure,
but they've got the book. Gino wrote the book Traction. It's a how-to book. If you want to take it and do it, there are teams that do it. Now, I would say that doing it successfully, all of them really doing it purely, that's probably a little harder to do when you're doing it on your own because it's not what you do, right? It's not what you live day in and day out. But there are teams that use it, and even your listeners, like they don't have to have a professional implementer.
Agreed.
There are tools that are available online. If they want to just take the VTO, for example, and learn how to develop a 2-page strategic plan for their business and just master that tool and use it to help guide and direct their business decisions, great, right? They can absolutely do it. And in fact, we're all about law of abundance. We're going to give you the foundational tools. I even talk to a team and help them to get started using it. have to use me. They may never use me, right? It may not be in their bandwidth, but certainly getting people started using the tools is all about the community, and we like to live the law of abundance. So just following.
I'll share too. I read Traction and I was like, yeah, it's good. Like, it's good. I like it. The book that really shifted my train of thought was What the Heck is EOS?
Yeah.
Which is
What the
meant
Heck
for
is
the
EOS
team
is
to
great.
read, right? And that was allowed me to connect the dots of like, oh, I get it now. I understand how this will help the team be better, right? Because I think the disconnect, and it's kind of like Slack.
I was just thinking of Slack actually.
So Spencer was saying we need Slack, which is this communication tool. And I was like, I don't think so, dude. I think everyone pretty much knows what's going on. Because from my vantage point, I do know what's going on, right? Because I'm connected to all of it. But then my wife, Megan, who works for us, was like, oh, yeah, I didn't know that. And I was like, oh, shit. Okay. So maybe Slack would be helpful, right? And that's really the perspective that What the Heck is EOS allowed me to see is like, how does it help your social media director who lives in Moab feel connected to the company?
Yeah,
Right. And
right.
and just reading Traction, that didn't click for me. It's when I read What the Heck is EOS that it really was like, oh, I get it.
Real quick too, just while it's on the top of my mind, you talked about some of the tools like the VTO and the scorecard and things like that. It makes mention of that in Traction, and obviously like What the Heck is EOS, right? Cody did a really good job at digitizing these, and they're available. If anyone wants, we can send you a template for what that would look like in a Google Drive document.
Yeah, that was actually when Cody was digitizing. I said, Cody, you don't have to create all this in Google Docs. Listen, we got the documents. But he created it, and it looked just like the EOS documents.
Exactly,
and I got to hand
like
it to him. I mean, he told me, he said, Craig, this will be beautiful, and they were. and
they turned out great.
They looked exactly like the EOS documents. And now there's apps now that are out there that actually manage all the EOS tools for organizations. So they
Richard
don't
was
have
telling
to.
us about one of those. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
what it
for
was.
me, just because we operate our business off of Google, it made it so it just really was ingrained in what we do, right? Like it's just there. It's how we
All
look
in
at
one
everything. It's
place.
how our team updates everything. And then for like the scorecards, it's easy, it's shareable. They have the access to it right away. But okay, so let's play my game really fast.
Okay.
So I will go first, and then let's go all the way around, and then we can share why.
Okay, remind everyone what this is.
So what I asked everyone to do is to write down their favorite piece of EOS.
Yeah.
And so my favorite piece personally is the VTO.
Okay, I actually wrote down 3 because
Cheater.
I just feel like there's so many
Share
good
all
things.
3 and then say what your favorite is.
Okay, so I wrote just the open and honest. We say that at every quarterly.
Yeah, that's
right?
important.
That's really important, and it's led to a lot of really amazing like conversations and discussions that have changed the business for the better.
And people's lives.
Certainly. Measurables. I really like the scorecard. The VTO would be part of that as well.
Scorecard.
Yeah, and then the tools for success. So like LMA, delegate to elevate, things like that.
Yeah.
Right? Personal vision, that type of stuff that's actually in the toolbox. And we've started to get into that a little bit more now because Craig cracks the whip over us, and we're doing better at remembering that we have an LTM.
So I had a couple too, but my favorite thing is really about core values, and which is part of the VTO, but core values and core focus, because that's about team health.
Yeah.
To me, and then it goes into the who is in an organization, which is the accountability chart. Because that to me is the ultimate tool for clarity in any organization is what are the functions and who is accountable for what. It's who, not how. I want to share a great book with you that I think every entrepreneur should read by Dan Sullivan. And I'll just give him a shameless plug right now. It's who, not how. It's really not how am I going to get this done.
Oh, that's good because gap and gain is amazing.
But who can help me get what I want to get done in my business? It's the who.
Yeah.
And so that's the accountability chart is designed for the who. And that just helps business owners really scale their business when they get the functions down about what they absolutely need and then who's going to do it. That's the most, not how, who.
Sure.
I love that. And Dan Sullivan's such a good writer, too. Yeah. His book, Gap and Gain, is awesome. Okay, so I'll talk about mine. So I'll talk about the VTO, which obviously has the core values in there. But what really stood out to me and made me even more of a believer in EOS, that's Craig. That's one penalty.
Strike. Yeah.
Someone's calling
my
Craig.
first podcast is like, holy cow, my phone's on the side of the
I
desk.
remember my first podcast. So VTO, because we created a new company, and it really stemmed from Spencer being open and honest at one of our quarterlies and saying, I want ownership. I want to own pieces and parts of this company, future companies, whatever. I want to be an owner. And so we had a really good discussion about what could that look like and how could we do it. And one of the offshoots of that was the creation of Vibrant Marketing. And so we went with, it's a different ownership group, obviously, than Vibrant. It's a different group of people. And we went to a meeting and we created a VTO for this new company. And I don't know how I would have started a new company without EOS, but I know we wouldn't have done that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like we went through, we did our core values, we set up our core focus, we set up our core target, we set our 1 year, or no, we did our 10-year and our 3-year goals. And it was like, it just made it so easy because we literally just went down the VTO. And then I just remembered the exercises we had done with you, but there's not a chance in hell that company would have had any of those things had it not been for EOS. Just like we did at Vibrant, we didn't create our core values until we'd been in business for 3 years, because you just kind of start building and then eventually you're like, oh, it's real. We better put some structure around it. Yeah. And so having that VTO is like the guidepost of like, no one should have a business without that existing first. And so that I already believed in it, but after going through that exercise at Vibrant Marketing, it really cemented for me how important it really is to have that.
Shameless plug for Vibrant Marketing too. Check it out, vibrantmarketing.co.
It's a dope website.
It's an amazing website. Maybe you can speak real quick just to the VTO a little bit more and how, if you were a hotel, how that would be something that's relevant for your operations.
To me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I think that what's so helpful for the VTO, when you're at a hotel, if you got a large staff, it really lets the staff know who you are. So you can use it as a hiring, in your hiring phase, or once they've started, like, look, this is us. I'd probably do it before you hire them and say, this is our core values. Because if you look at the core values, you're going to know, am I a good fit for this? Or not?
Who you're getting into.
Yeah. You should hire and fire and reward based on those core values. And so they're going to look at that and they're going to know, do I fit that or not? And it also gives them the ability to see the future. So if you're coming in at a front desk job or a housekeeper or maybe even somewhere in management, you get to see like, oh, what's that 3-year picture look like? How big is the company at that point? What's our revenue look like? What are the goals and things that they have? Are they going to build in 3 years? Are they going to build another hotel? And that means that there'll be a GM opportunity that doesn't exist today. It really allows you to be bought in and excited on what the future is. And then of course, you get to see the 1-year goals and what the rocks are. And I think it just allows them to understand that this business is operating with intention. Because if I'm going to go work for somebody, I sure as shit want to make sure that they have a plan in order, right? And that they're not just showing up every day and doing their best.
Definitely.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that was good.
So what, you want to share one of yours?
Sure.
Elaborate more on one of those?
Yeah, so I really like the measurables part of this, and that for me specifically would be the scorecard and the rocks.
Yeah.
So speaking about these,
love it.
So starting with the rocks are like big, audacious, hairy goals that you have over the course of a quarter, which is why this podcast exists.
I was just going to say the same thing. Yeah.
Yep. Why Craig is here on the podcast. That was one of my rocks, was that we should start a podcast, right? And that was a big, crazy goal. And at the time, it was actually easier than I think we give ourselves credit for. Like we just press record on our iPhone, and but it was hard, like thanks to the help of Blueform Media, we're able to have this really great studio and
have guests.
Yeah, have guests, and
not have to rearrange all my furniture in my house.
It's not so taxing for Cody, but for us that was a big goal, and now here we are today, and people are reaching out to us, and we're able to provide a lot of value because of the podcast. So that's a rock, something that you can't do in a week's time, right? And so Craig can probably expand a little bit more on a rock, but we usually set 3 to 4 of these per member of the executive team, and then beyond the executive team, like the people on our teams have their own rocks, and sometimes it's 0, sometimes it's depending on who it is, sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 3, right? Just depends on the goal. Scorecard is something that happens weekly, and it's a measurable that's assigned to each team member that is essential to the organizational health and the company health. So like, for example, mine are posting these podcasts and getting them syndicated to all the proper channels. Another one is lead development. One of them is the amount of discussions that we have with potential properties who are looking to join our portfolio. And all of those are crucial and essential to the health of the company, right? Cody's are finances and checking account and AR and AP, things that are also very important.
It's amazing how humans were kind of like dogs.
Yeah.
And when there's like a reward and it's like, oh, it went green. Like, I want to do that more, because obviously I always wanted to get our AR taken care of. But as soon as we created the scorecard, I did a way better job of like sending those reminders. And like, I'll text you now and be like, hey, reach out to so-and-so and get that invoice paid. It really has changed. If one thing changed our daily operations the most, I'd say it was a scorecard.
Yeah, I agree.
Because like for our social media teams, this is so embarrassing to say, it's just the truth. We didn't have any real visibility to how well they were doing their role, right?
Yeah, open and honest, right?
There could be a company like a Watchman Villas where it's one that Breck owns, and so it's always treated with a little bit less intention because it's like, oh yeah, it's just that's one.
You kind of get like in your mind, you have like a past to not do as well of a job, right? Which is weird. But it's
not
the
okay,
truth.
right?
Yeah.
But so Watchman Villas may have went 3 months without a post, and there really wasn't any visibility to that. But now Kyle and Emery each have their own scorecard of how many posts they have to do per week in order to meet our clients' expectations. And so now you can see it; it's just right there.
Yep.
And there's so many things that the scorecard brings immediate attention to that allow you to be effective every single week. And then of course we have our level 10s. And having that consistent meeting every single week at the same time, covering the issues, going over all of our to-dos, our ability, my confidence in us completing what we're supposed to complete is so much higher than it would have ever been prior to EOS.
Totally. And not to take away from your time, Craig, but we've also taken the same format and applied it to our clients in those meetings. So with our clients, we meet in a level 10 fashion. So we'll usually have like a segue, or sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. We'll do like a scorecard update. We go through an IDS list with them. So issues that we know that need to go for a long time. Each member of potentially the property of the company has a task list that we can track over a period of time when things are getting done, when they're not. And so we've taken the process that you've given us with EOS and diversified it and applied it to our properties. And now we're able to have traction there too, which has been really cool.
I think that's been really awesome to see you thriving, and which means you're living EOS. So the teams that really thrive in it, they live it. Teams that just survive, they pick it up and put it down. They kind of do EOS, but I really like what you folks are doing when you're living it, you're thriving it, and you're passing that down to your clients, giving them some structure. So I think that's fantastic. And you had mentioned what we've been talking about here is the 5 foundational tools of EOS, and that's really 80% of the system.
Yeah.
The scorecard, right? You're taking all the ambiguity, subjectivity, ego, personality out of the equation and boiling the organization down to good, hard data because the data entered correctly, right? Doesn't lie. It's the data. We've got the accountability chart that I mentioned, which is one of my favorite tools because it provides clarity around function and who's in the organization. What do you need in the organization to make to make it continue forward? And you got to get that because you can have a great vision. The VTO, you mentioned that. There's another foundational tool. 2-page strategic plan, simplified strategic plan for an entrepreneur. I mean, we're entrepreneurs. We don't need anything complicated. We don't need a 30-page plan that no one would read. So 2-page strategic plan, and we've got that so that we can lock that down about where we're at and where we're going. Right? We have a clear vision, but we can't achieve the vision without the right people in the right seats. And so that's a huge thing, right? We got to get those the accountability chart. And then you mentioned rocks. That's another foundational tool. Quarterly objectives that have to be done for the greater good of the company. They're not the urgent firefighting that people do every day in their job. It's not their day job, but it is something that they have to get done in the quarter for the greater good, life or death of the organization. So rock setting, and that's really about prediction. Whether you're in a boutique hotel operation or whether you're in a $100 million small business, you've got to get good at predicting. And that's all about predicting quarterly, scorecard, predicting weekly. On our VTO, we're predicting annually. So always really predicting, trying to get better and better at that. You folks have gotten better and better at that as you've gone through the process.
The predicting thing is so important because like this last quarter, we knew we had a delta we had to make up, right? It was like, okay, if everything just stays the same, we're going to end up at a negative, right? So what's that gap we have to cover in order to hit it? And without taking that time for that intentional thought and focus and planning, there's no way we would have done it because we wouldn't have had that understanding of like, okay, this is exactly the gap we need to make up. And because of that, we hit it. We hit all of our targets for last quarter. And I know that we wouldn't have done it because the target just didn't exist. You can't hit a target that isn't there. Right. And so it's been really, really incredible. And I think one thing I want to bring up too is because the quarter just shifted. So we're doing all of our quarterly reviews right now. And so we use one of the EOS documents, the 555, to do that. And it was so interesting updating all of those. I had to update 5 of them for my direct reports. And it's like, it starts with the GWC, which stands for get it, want it, capacity to do it, right? If you don't GWC the role, you can't do it. If even one of those is missing, it's not going to work. And it starts with that, and then it goes into your core values, and then it goes into the accountability chart, what their roles are. And then you go into your rocks, and then you have notes. And it's like, because of all the tools of EOS, if you were to ask me without those tools, how did someone do in the last quarter? That'd be a really hard question to answer.
Very difficult.
Right? Like not
because
only
it's so subjective.
Yeah, like and you're only going to remember the last couple of weeks.
Exactly.
Are you really going to remember what happened in the second week of April?
Right.
You know, you're really not. But because of the scorecard, you could look at it, and if someone's measurable was red 80% of the time for that quarter, then that's an obvious opportunity where it's like, hey, this fell short. Let's have a conversation about that. And it allows you to have that conversation with your team. And we've got one of our team members, Becca, who you know, and she had a big history with like corporations, bigger corporations. And when we did our first quarterly review with her, she's like, wow, this is amazing. Because at the big companies I worked for, I would get like an annual review. And anyone who's done an annual review knows that those are shit because
they're the worst.
If you can't remember the quarter, you're sure as hell not going to remember the beginning of the year.
That's right. Yep.
And it's so archaic. And it's like you're complimenting, you're rewarding and correcting at way too late of a date, right? If they had an opportunity in February and you're talking to them about it in February the next year, that's obviously the opportunity has come and gone. And so to be able to do it in those 90-day snapshots, she was just blown away that we did that. And I know that the employees really appreciate it because it gives them that voice with their direct report. And we do check-ins pretty much with everyone on our team.
Yeah, weekly.
But you get that like structured, formalized conversation where you get, and for us, I mean, it's mostly rewarding because it's so clear what their roles and jobs are. Mm-hmm. No one would be confused as to what's my role? What am I supposed to be doing? Did I or did I not succeed?
Yeah, if you want a good performance review, you just do the things on your scorecard and your rocks.
Yeah.
Bravo, guys. That's awesome. I love hearing you talk about it. It just continues to get me excited about it.
Do we get like a cap and gown when we graduate?
I was going to ask, like, is there a certificate? How does that work?
I'm going to develop some type of graduation ceremony. I'm not sure.
That's great.
It might borderline on hazing, but we'll figure out something.
We'll allow it. Yeah. I think that talking like this in an open setting is so important for people to understand that there's so many tools out there. So many entrepreneurs, I think, feel like they're just struggling to get air, you know, and you can feel lost. And we certainly did at the beginning of Vibrant. And when you don't have all that structure in place, it's almost like you're just putting out fires, right? Without any intention. And it was funny because today, like to start my day, I looked at my calendar. I was like, all right, what do I got going on today? And then I looked at my level 10. I was like, what kind of tasks do I have to do today? And then I was like, all right, I've got my quarterly reviews. Let's make sure I get those updated. And it really does direct all the things that we do. And we've already predetermined that these are the most important things for the business. So if you do those things, then it's all going to shake out in the end.
Awesome.
Yeah, it makes it really easy. So, Craig, maybe you can speak a little bit to, we work in hospitality, right? We have many conversations with you about clients, needs, programs, things like that. Just from like an outsider's perspective into hospitality looking in, what ways could EOS benefit a hotel, a spa, anyone working inside the hospitality world?
Well, all of the tools together, I think, is going to create, if you're at a boutique hospitality business or just hospitality, it's going to provide clarity. That's and accountability. That's really what EOS is all about: clarity and accountability. So the 5 leadership or the tools that we talked about, 5 foundational tools that we discussed, you don't have to master all of those. If you were running a hotel operation and a small hotel operation, you needed some help with EOS, and if you just picked one of those foundational tools and mastered it and applied it, right, to that, and you could definitely help your business. But it's about clarity. What are we trying to accomplish? Right, that's what the vision, traction, organizer. You have to get clear on that. So the 6 key components. One thing that we really didn't talk about EOS is the 6 key components. What are they? Well, vision's the first part. And we have a key discipline that helps us get clear on the vision, the VTO. Second discipline is we have to get that shared by all. Everyone has to share it in the organization. So especially with a small operation, if we have 10 employees, 10 out of 10 need to share the vision. They'll stick out like a sore thumb if they don't. The second component of the 6 key components that Gino developed was the people component. And what do we have for that to get that set? Well, we got the accountability chart. We've got to get right people in the right seats. And we've got the core values to help us get the right people. Are the core values, do people reek of who we are? Do they love hanging out with us? And do you like hanging out with them? That's right people.
Yep. And then we do the people analyzer every quarter.
Yeah. And the data component, scorecard, right? That's the measurable part. We got to get good data. We got to have a great scorecard, and that everyone eventually in the organization has a measurable. This is about clarity and accountability. And when you have those 3 things of the 6 key components rock solid, there's no place to hide in the organization. Every impurity gets smoked out. And the 4th component is issues. You got to get really good at solving issues. A lot of small business owners, they're just not really good at solving their issues. They keep coming back to the same issue over and over again, week after week, and it derails them from their highest and best use. 5th key component, the process component. your cookie cutter franchise prototype. You two and Breck have continued to develop that environment. You've got this franchise prototype that people would say, well, why would we use Vibrant? Because we have proven processes that are put in place that provide discipline and allow us to execute with quality and consistency over and over again. And that's what makes it easier for a business to manage too, when you have processes like that. And of course, then traction, the 6th key component, rocks, setting good rocks, doing good predicting, and then meeting that level 10 meeting pulse. So we're meeting every week, constantly checking the pulse of the business. So those 6 key components get strengthened by those 5 foundational tools that you've been talking about today. That's what it's going to help with a business owner, whether you're a boutique hotel operation or a larger organization. Those foundational tools that we discuss are going to help strengthen those 6 key components. And the stronger that an organization is in those 6 key components, just the healthier you are. And you're going to, those other 134 things that Gino talks about that every business owner has to deal with, if you're at 80% or better in those 6 key components that I just mentioned, those 134 things are just going to go, they're not going to be an issue.
I think what's interesting is you talk about health, and EOS is like health, where you can't ever arrive, right? Like you can't just be healthy today and be like, I'm done, I did it.
Right.
Because the second your habits stop becoming healthy, you stop becoming healthy. And I remember for us, like we were deep into EOS, and you're going over something and we're like, oh shit, we're not solving issues, right?
Yeah, right.
We weren't moving anything from the scorecard to the issues
Correct.
list.
Yeah, anything that was in red, we were not taking it to the IDS list.
And we weren't really solving anything. And it's like, and so for the people who are listening, it isn't like we have it figured out, or it's like, oh man, they just got it. Like it takes so long and it takes so much effort.
Yeah, we're 2 years in and we're still getting stuff wrong.
Well, and so one thing we realized, so at I think 2 EOS quarterlies ago, we were talking about the core values, R5, right? And Becca's like, why don't we add it to the L10 so that way we talk about it every meeting? And so we did that because we have our L10 at the executive team, we have an ops L10, and we have a marketing L10. So, I mean, the business is just dialed. And we go over every single meeting. And then the other day I was like, how many of you can recite this? And they're like, oh, geez, I don't know, So this meeting on Tuesday, I blacked it out. And I said, who wants to go first? And they struggled to get it. And there's only 5. And we talk about it all the time. And Breck reads the story every single quarterly. And yet they still didn't have it all dialed, right? And so I think that's the important thing for the listeners is, you got to tell people so many times before it clicks. And obviously that just shows for us, like there's an opportunity for us to increase that like real stickiness of it all. And I think for us, it's going to be, for me at least, it's going to be quizzing them, because now they're going to know like at any moment. And then Melissa didn't know it. And so I made her go first to start the segue. And so I think that was just a fun way that we're incorporating it. But I think the message there is that it's a consistent thing you have to do every single day.
Yeah, you can't talk about those things enough. And I think at any time a business owner thinks, oh, I've talked about that so much, people are sick of hearing that, you still haven't talked about it enough. Because just as you mentioned, sometimes people it doesn't resonate with them. But when you live it and you're talking about them all the time, it's amazing what employees will say, oh, they really believe in that. That guys are talking about it all the time. Say, yeah, we do. That's how we run the business.
Right.
So I think it's great that you're doing that. And it's a fun way to do it. Right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and like you say too, you've always got to tie back if someone did something really well, like one of ours being driven, it's like, oh, Spencer, you knew we needed to go get that contract. You were so driven in your pursuit of getting Sean Cannell on the podcast.
Yeah, maybe to a fault on that one.
And it's kind of like Sean said. So Sean talked about content. He said he has 350 pieces of content a week, which is absurd. It's such a high amount. But then it made me think of that too. It's like, just because we're saying it all the time doesn't mean that everyone's tuned in when we're saying it.
Yeah.
Right? Because we are remote and we do have people who work from home. And so at any given moment, someone could be at the door during a call, or maybe there's a dog or there's a kid. And so you may be saying it every meeting, but how tuned in are they? So it just really reinforces that you've got to continue to talk about it. You've got to find fun and clever ways to incorporate it in your business. So it really becomes a part of your culture and who you are.
Awesome. And it's really cool when you see employees doing that on their own and they're thinking about your core values when they're acting, when they're making decisions, they're acting for the greater good of the organization. It just makes the business more that manageable part and even fun, because the employees are living it, doing it, and it doesn't have to, if there's one source of accountability or one source of discipline, that's a hard place to work.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it really is.
Absolutely. So if someone wanted to, let's say there's a listener You've already talked about like you can go independently research EOS. You could purchase all the books. You could go. I mean, everything's online. But if they did want an implementer, what's the best way for them to go about that?
So there's 700 of us from the UK to New Zealand. So it's not a huge population, but there are professional, certified, and expert implementers probably in the communities that they're in. So if they really want, they could go to www.eosworldwide.com and you can find an implementer. And I'm happy to help guide and direct anybody. I have an association with many implementers in the community, happy to direct people, but you can definitely go to the website and put in your location and you're going to get connected with several different implementers that you can have a conversation with and decide if you want to move forward with them or just get more information.
And then for people who are like, man, Craig's the truth, I want to work with Craig, you can email Craig at craig.andrews@eosworldwide.com, and we'll put this in the show notes too. Or you can go to his website, which is his microsite for EOS, which is www.eosworldwide.com/Craig-Andrews.
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, we'll put all those in the show notes so you don't have to worry about getting it wrong. But I mean, I highly recommend connecting with Craig. Craig is highly sought after and very successful. And so he only works within a 1-hour flight of St. George, Utah. So that's actually quite a big area. You can get to a lot of places an hour. That covers California,
a lot of
Nevada,
places.
Arizona, potentially New Mexico. Charmaine,
Yeah, most of our listeners are actually West Coast. So
yeah, so for most of them, you can do it. Yep. So, I mean, I couldn't give more of a recommendation for Craig, and not just Craig, EOS as a whole, and also doing the process. So if you're listening and you're like, oh, that's just too big of a commitment, I can tell you with absolute confidence it is so worth it. And I'm so thankful that we did it. I don't know where we'd be today without it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think some actionables that we talked about would be reading Traction.
That's where you start for sure.
Reading what the heck is EOS. And then Craig, do you have any other recommendations that folks could read or see?
Actually, the book that I recommend for people, and Gino might say, hey, why would you recommend that? It's the second book that he wrote with Mike Payton. And Mike Payton was the second visionary at EOS after Gino stepped down, but they wrote a book called Get a Grip.
Oh, yeah, Get a Grip's great. Yeah, I like Get a Grip better than Traction, too.
It's a fable. It's a story about a team that implemented EOS, and why Traction is the foundation of EOS. Get a Grip's right behind it. It's a good story. I like to learn with stories.
Get a Grip has the woman who is like the integrator and the man who is the visionary, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Get a Grip is good because it is written in that. So it's kind of Patrick Lencioni-esque where it's got a story component and it really helps you understand. And they got that accountant who's like nasty.
Carol,
that's it. That's a great book.
So I highly recommend that book. And then if that resonates with your listeners, then explore EOS a little bit more and determine if it's a fit.
Nice.
And then we talked a little bit about Patrick Lencioni, but so much of his, in fact, the first Patrick Lencioni book, Craig got me one for Christmas. I think it was Motive is the one that you got me for Christmas. And I read it and I asked him, I said, did Gino hire Patrick to write this for him to like subliminally like sell EOS? Because the principles are so well aligned and Patrick's books are great. So that's another rabbit hole you can go down that just gives you some really good information and direction.
Yeah, can't go wrong with any of his books either.
Yep.
So then, is there anything else you want to leave the audience with, or anything you want to share before we make you give us a meeting rating?
I would just, I think you've covered it. I think for entrepreneurs, you doing a little research, reading, I think you've really encapsulated, and you living it is really a great example as well. So if I can help anyone, it's a law of abundance at EOS. So we try and share whatever tools we can to help people, whether they decide to get professional implementation or they just want to do it on their own. Happy to help anybody. So,
and certainly you can reach out to Spencer and I too, and we'll
sure.
and we'll happy to have a conversation about EOS. And like Spencer said, share some of our documents, or even get on a screen share and run you through how we set it up and how we use it, because I think it's so important. So one other thing we do at EOS is we give a meeting rating at the end, 1 through 10. We're going to say no 7s because that's kind of cheating. Because then you really got to decide, is it a 6 or is it an 8? Yeah, you can't sit on the fence. So, Craig, you started the segue. So why don't you give us a podcast rating?
I'm going to give you a 10.
A 10.
Nice.
Spencer?
10, of course.
Yeah, it's absolutely a 10. Craig, thank you so much for being here. It was so fun to have you, and I think that you gave so much value to our audience, and I really appreciate everything you've done for us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks,
appreciate
Craig.
it. You betcha.
Okay, good.
Da-da-da.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's intro this thing.
Okay. Okay, here we go. On this episode of Virtual GM, we have an incredible guest, our EOS implementer, Craig Andrews. If you've listened to the episode before, you've heard us talk about EOS at detail, but today we get the water directly from the well. Make sure you stay tuned and listen to the entire episode, and when you're done, click that subscribe. Thank you so much and enjoy the episode.